Thank you very much. We want to run through the topic that have been selected: sustainable spiritual leadership principles for sustainability in the 21st century. I'm still having a problem here. This is the one I want. Okay. I don't know why.
You have to press the, I think, 5. It's not moving. We have other PowerPoints.
That is not the one I want. I want.
This one.
Yeah. No, not this one. Why?
This one.
Yeah. But. Okay. Okay. I have said that leadership as a word can be divided into two. We have a leader and a ship. And in going through the search, I found out the leader is a person who stands amidst a group to persuade them to do what will benefit both himself or herself and the group in the long run. He is the one who has learned hard way to help people to perform their duty, the satisfaction of an institution for which he or she is a part. And the ship, which is the second word, is the process for which things are done. And so if you look at that, you can really see that both have something to do. That the process is there, and the act of being a leader is also there. And the two comes together to help us to see the picture of who is a leader. And it is said that leadership is the process of influencing the behavior of people to engage in organizational practice to achieve a short-term and long-term sustainability focus. Even if you are a conference president, a treasurer, or a secretary, and you are serving for only one term, you're a professor and you are serving for only one term, that particular time is a time for you to express influence, for people to follow you, so that when you are not there, your influence can continue to flow through those who are going to continue. People talked about succession planning, but I believe that if you can avail yourself well and influence people and then work with them to go, if you have 10 people, at least 2 of them should be people, when you leave, should be able to handle the program, whether you are there or you are not there. If that one doesn't happen, and you have to specifically pick people and train, that one, we can question that particular one. And so we want to, in an African context, I picked us to see what really has happened. And whilst I was looking at the internet, there are about 8 of our African leaders who are public ones. Mengistu Haile Mariam, Oman Abashir, Idi Amin Dada, Charles Taylor, Sabari, Kabila, and then Bokassa plus Gaddafi, a group of leaders who came between 1960 and 1990s, that if you mention their name, you see autocratic leadership. And nobody has liked those groups except only people who were very close to them when they were ruling. And as one of our members mentioned over here, because of the way they ruled other 5-10 years, the scar of whatever they left on the ground are still there. And sometimes it also affects some of us who are also in a church or a religious-prone leadership. And that one has been a very negative side of it. Unfortunately, the colonial masters left something we did not like, and our people who came in also did the same. With my 30 years experience in church side, I have also seen leaders who came and then did their best. Some of them came, used laissez-faire, and it did not work for them. Some of them used other leadership principles, and they did not work well. And so we are seeing that there is still a search for leadership, principles that are sustainable and it can last. And going through the literature where I saw that there is a definition. The definition we are talking about is that leadership has about the definition of leadership has three things, which the first one is social influence. The one who is leading needs to have an influence on himself. This morning, our leader sent a note for us to read, and that forced me to check on Steve Jobs. And I realized that though he has influenced the whole world, everybody likes Apple, but he is one of the most secular, autocratic leader that nobody mentions about it. A very, very autocratic leader. But nobody questions it. Why he was able to use that autocratic style on the people he was working with, and they understood him, and they worked together. So that influence is there. We cannot disregard anything. But I also realized, sat down and think that can that guy who started Apple with a friend and led it to he died be a leader in a Seventh-day Adventist church? It can never happen. Because the two have different missions. He's a profit-oriented. Whatever he wants is in his own head. And if he's picking people, he picks people who will listen to him and work with him. A church style is a movement which has a mission which is not ours. And so we have to do consensus building so that if I have a wrong conceptual things in my mind, I will not use it to spoil the church. And so the social influence is there as one of the leadership things that we need to learn. And where can we get it? As we go along, we will find out. And so the second one is a voluntary action, most especially on our side. As a student, faculty, and church people, we need people to voluntarily follow. And you must be a good leader to get that particular voluntary followership so that people know that your reasoning is on the ground. You can allow questions, you allow people to express their mind, and then you direct them. In the African context, most especially from where I come from, our king has 13 sub-chiefs under him. And he sits in state and he will never talk. He throws the agenda on the board and listen to every 13, all the 13, to talk either negative or positive. And when they have finished, then he comes in. He comes in to solve the puzzle which has been on the ground, because you get people who are speaking left and right. And when he has finished, what he does is that he picks what he has in mind and he wanted to do, and pick all the 13 and do a summary. By the time he finished speaking, nobody argues, because he has tried to get everybody's mind in the first place. And he has also, if he had a wrong concept, change it polish it in his mind, and he summarized the whole thing. And that one makes voluntary action comes up because everybody would like to follow. Since you have listened to me and you have incorporated whatever I'm having in your mind, then you cannot force me, but I will follow you. The third one is that leadership results in followers' behavior that is purposeful and goal-directed in some sort of an organized setting. And so that also is another thing that we need a leader when we are talking about a leadership thing that needs to be part in the thing. Fred Lutheran, in his book, Organizational Behavior, said that leadership does remain much of a black box or unexplained concept. And so that's the reason why much has been written since the 1930s up to the 80s. Different type of area people have taken and then written more about it. Stockdale also concluded that the existing research had not demonstrated the utility of the traits approach. In more recently, in the 90s and the 2000s, the identified characteristics has been as a deep personal humility, intense professional will, importance of connection, and value-based expression of leadership as indicated by Collins, Thomas, George, and these writers who have written more about leadership. And so we are asking the question, that is what literature is talking about on the secular side. When we come to us as a church, and most especially zeroing into African continent, what do we have? For us, we are Bible people. We cannot throw the secular one away, but what can we do? And so that one led me also to get into the Bible, to look at before this time, about 3,000 years ago in Egypt, and less a time before that, Abraham and Joseph came into the scene. And when we pick somebody like Joseph and Daniel, we can really see leadership principle that they did use at that particular time. But the whole world, because of secular minded, and I don't know, I can't trace why, has completely alienated anything that is even good and came through the Jewish system. They will pick the Greek one, but nobody quotes the one from the Jewish line. And it has been a strange thing for me after I've gone through literature, that it is Greek, Roman, Greek, like that. But if you look at it from the biblical side, and you pick the Jewish line, you can pick several names that comes out. The world seems to have deliberately ignored to reevaluate, to see if these things which Daniel and Joseph used can fit the system. And so looking at it, we see that at a quick glance, we reveal that one hand, they were all different people. They had different personality, temperament, traits, and training. But on one hand, they demonstrated that there's no one leadership type style, but there are a set of leadership characteristics that they all had. On one hand, they all held some principles in common. The principle of love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Success wasn't part of their mind, what they were thinking about, because if you add all these things together and you look at the person's life, you can see success flowing. But the principles they were using was love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness. The three presentations that has gone on this morning, if you look at those ones, cannot hold well if leaders of these biblical people were not using these principles. And we know for sure that the fruit of the Spirit, which Paul made mention about it in Galatians 4, I call it the spiritual leadership principle. And I think that that one is a principle that no law go against that. And we need to re-examine those things. Because mention Daniel, mention Nehemiah, mention Esther, these things goes with them. Come to Daniel, go to Peter. Initially was hard, difficult, but when he got onto the road, take Paul, the same. All of them allowed this fruit of the Spirit as a leadership principle to overtake them. And immediately they understood them and allowed to work with the principles. All that they did left a mark at the end. And so this one, which is a propositional paper, is saying that there's a need for leadership principles, skills that we do for a sustainable success for now and the future. And so we should not, as leaders, think about, I'm going for one term, and because of that, the interest of why I should not do for a long time should not be there. Or I'll do something that will make me perpetuate myself, but I will neglect the principles we are talking about. Even if it is 1 month, put all these principles together, because you don't know what the years hold. That the small seed you sow with selfless love and all those things you put together will germinate and will create a good impression to come. What we say is that leadership lack the principle and skills they need to learn to become effective today. And in one of the articles, he says that the top 5 needs now is inspiring commitment, strategic planning, leading people, resourceful, employees development skill. The question is, can that one, all these things work effectively without the principle Paul has laid down in Galatians 14? If love is not there, if joy, if peace, patience, if self-control, if faithfulness are not there, can these 5 leading principles work? And that's the reason why we see some people lead, when they leave, a vacuum is left there, because there's nobody to continue. He went there with himself and his interest, and immediately he leaves the scene, the company drops. And this morning, what somebody said, that Steve Jobs' work that he has done will be revealed in the next 5 years. Why? Because he feels that if Apple drops down, then it means that he was doing everything because of himself. But if in the next 5 years Apple begins to grow, then everybody knows that he left a legacy that will go for a longer term. In the same context, Toyota has been in line for more than 65 years. And the only time they made loss was 2008. For 60 years, they had profit consistently. Because the traces of the Toyoda's people family, which makes leadership, doesn't think about now, they think about the next 100 years. It is not money they are searching for. They have trained themselves in such a way that what you are doing now is not what we want to happen. The next 10 years and 15 years. And until each one of us get that concept of sustainability and using a biblical principle, it will be very, very difficult for us to leave a legacy that this church, and most especially the African continent, will be able to go. The current leadership deficit or gap is lack of spiritual leadership principles. Without it, the current leaders are not adequately prepared for the future. From the above write-up, we could deduce that the neglect of biblical principle has led to mankind searching for several ways of quality leadership that is sustainable for now and for the future. And Daniel and Paul and Joseph, to name a few, lived in various eras, yet we could see the traces of these principles in the book of Galatians 2:5, verses 22 and 23, reflected in their leadership life. The principles are love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. These principles are acquired through experience and a walk with the God. Recent articles that is marvelous, that are still talking about, these are secular ones, talking about real love in the workplace, love in organizational leadership, the joy of leadership, warriors for peace, re-engineering health, that is talking more about other things, and then kindness also are being written now. Self-control is being written on. I end by saying that I then propose that love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control be used as a new spiritual leadership principles to be tested for the future leadership principles of the 21st century. Thank you very much.
We thank Brother Afriyie for the presentation. Now, if there is any question, of course there should be questions. Questions and answers. Any question? No question? Okay.
Somebody.
You must have, okay.
Maybe just mine is a simple question. The way you presented, we have seen the kind of leaders. And you wonder that some people, when they're in position, you find the things are moving in the right way, and the people, they are comfortable. But other people also, you see, they have the character of being a leader, but when they're in the position, things can be okay, but people, they are not comfortable. Maybe the question is this: is the leader something, can it be born with it, or can it be learned, or is a gift from God? So can you try maybe to explain it a bit?
For us as Christians, and I think there's a whole lot of literature about it, that there are people, I will not call it born. If I'm born into a family where my great-grandmother, parents have been leaders, by the time I grew up, that thing has become part of me. I don't know. It is like you get to this particular campus, see the small boys using, what do you call it? Is it roller? A boy about 2 years, he's rolling like that. I said, wouldn't he fall? He will not fall. By the time he grows up to me and he's doing this same thing on this campus, where did he learn it? He learned it, but if you ask him, he cannot explain. Because he learned it when his mind had not grown. And so I can't say it is born. If you live in a place where you were trained, you heard Mama making a certain point. The children are growing, and you give them that particular training. By the time they come to themselves, that they can reason for themselves, they already know what to do. And so they have been trained. The problem many of us, including myself, is that we grow up, go to secondary school, high school, and then when we have finished and we go into college, then we realize that, oh, there's a leadership thing. It is that time we are going to struggle with that particular, all the principles we know. If you are not lucky to be a Christian, most especially a Seventh-day Adventist, to sit in the Sabbath school for us to criticize you, you are dead. Because you grow up, and if you are not careful, you become autocratic. But if you grow up small as a Seventh-day Adventist young person, Because in Sabbath school we are criticizing ourselves, by the time you become a leader in this church, you know that they will criticize. If you don't have that spirit, then don't accept anything. And so it depends how you see it. It can start from the family, it can start from the church, but if you involve yourself well, by the time you get to this stage, you can be a leader. You will not be the excellent one, but you will be a leader that you can lead people, because that is how we see. I come from Ghana, and in our parliament now, we have a very small secondary school in a remote area. But the people in parliament, then the bigger number of parliamentarians are from that school, Bekwai Secondary School. And we were asking the question, why should it happen? Because they come there for 3-5 years, they are not Seventh-day Adventists, but they sit in the Sabbath school, criticize, they debate there. By the time they get out to work, they know how to live with people, they know how to talk, they are able to express themselves. And so they get out, and you think somebody has trained them, but informally, they have gotten the training from where they studied or where they lived. And for me, I see it that particular way. Those who leave our school, our church, grow up and go and take positions outside and don't excel, then it means that inside them they have a problem. That one I can't define it. But I think that every Seventh-day Adventist who have gone through our school, who has gone through our church, and has gone with higher education, must be able to be a leader and then uphold these principles we are talking about. Because that is where our informal training and the formal training begins. And without that one, you cannot be a better one.
Yes, Pastor.
Thank you very much, Pastor, for the wonderful presentation. You have brought a new insight I never thought about.
Myself too.
Okay. But maybe for clarification, in the context in which Paul is writing the book of Galatians, he is addressing the church. And then he talks about these spiritual gifts as a fruit that is expected in all the believers. Those that have accepted Jesus Christ will have these. Now, in this setting, you are suggesting they can be looked at as principles of leadership. And that's a very good indeed, because a good leader must be all these. But now my question is, at what point do they become leadership principles and no longer principles for ordinary spiritual growth as church members? Is it in terms of quantities that the Holy Spirit bestows upon a particular leader? He begins to have more of each of these qualities than an ordinary member, or how? What is your comment? I don't know if my question is clear.
Yeah, I will try. Yeah, I will try to. When I was looking at it, the reason why I picked them after reading around was that I wanted to see, does this have something to do with the secular world? And that's the reason why I went back to say that if the secular world have started picking up love to write at the workplace, if they are writing about joy of leadership, if they are writing about peace, if they are writing about kindness, then maybe Paul wrote it in that particular context, but it can also serve the other side. But the point that I want all of us to look at is the fact that when Joseph got to Egypt, without his father, without anybody, the first principle he set up was that he wanted to honor God And for me, immediately he made his mind that he will not sin against God. You were talking about the Holy Spirit. As an individual, the Holy Spirit descends, and I think he begins to guide. So it is the commitment of you saying, Lord, I'm availing myself. This is what I want to do for you. You are not asking for a leadership position, but you are asking for principle that you can live by. And because of that, God led him into being a slave, helping people, bringing tests into his life at the age of 17 until he spent all, either he got all those 11 things until after he was 13 years. For me, that was a training point. I jumped that one and I want to pick David, a young guy who is a shepherd. He doesn't have anything. He's doing what the father is saying. But his mind, as one of our brothers said, his mind is with God. And God said, you, apart from all that you are trying to do, you need to be trained. And for good 20 years, he became a vagabond. Because somebody is pursuing him to make his life miserable. And we would think that it was bad. But it was also a training of learning how to love others who are enemies, the joy of still having a problem but still insisting, the patience, faithfulness, and self-control. I think that 20 years was an informal way, because he has leaned himself with God. God used that one to train him. Pick Daniel. He also made that commitment that he doesn't want to sin. And so he gets into Babylon. He is also a slave, but take a decision that I will not go against this one. And for me, the beginning point of whether this one will serve or not is our individual personal commitment to stick, to vow with God that we want to stay. And begin to learn, go through all temptations and tests, and whatever life thing we are going through, allow ourselves to go through. When we are needed for leadership, whether, for me that time, whether people prayed or did not pray, if you are needed, God will allow it to come to pass. Because how did Daniel's one come to pass and Joseph's one? God leads. And when you are needed to be a good leader, God will allow it to come to pass. Yes, people can play game. They can do all that kind of things. But God will allow it to come to pass. If it is our church is a God's church, I seem to have a little bit thing that we criticize it too much to the point that it seems as if it is rotting completely. We don't need to glorify it, but the point is that if I begin to criticize and I am not the right leader, why should I criticize? I should suggest things that will make the thing improve, but not the criticism. But to say, maybe we did not fast, we did not do this, and because of that, this one was not done. God is still leading, even if we make that mistake. So for me, I look at it from that angle, that these are principles that Paul picked it for the church, but individually, if each one of us who's supposed to fill in this room have those qualities, our work will be a little bit easier. That is how I see it. I don't know how it is.
Thank you very much. I think time is against us.
Finish.